Sorry for the interruption. That was the phone. But what I was saying was he lost to a much bigger Antonio Bigfoot Silva. And I mean, really, MMA size just can be a huge advantage. And he did take a beating against Silva, but he never quit. He wasn't finished. The doctor had to call the fight. So, I mean, Fedor, he's tough as nails. If it was anyone else, I think they would have been done from those shots that Silva was throwing. So, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. I really think Fedor is going to take this fight. I'm going to say that I actually think most of this fight will take place on the feet. So I do think one of these guys is going to get finished for the first time in their career. Looking at Henderson in his last fight, there was a moment in his fight against Rafael Feijiao where Feijiao connected with Henderson, dropped him. I don't know if he really got rocked or if he tripped, but he did get knocked down. And I think if Fedor did that, Fedor's got the speed to pounce on Henderson. And I really think one of these guys is going to go out for the first time. I'm going to pick Fedor by TKO in the third round. But this is an awesome matchup. I'm really looking forward to it. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think you covered it all. I mean, if nothing else, that punch right there in Hendo's last fight showed him that he can be caught clean. And if you get caught clean at by heavyweight, and you're used to fighting at 185, 205, it's not really where you want to be. And then I totally agree with what you said about Fedor. He has got the losses that you want to have as a professional. Those are the losses that you can go back from, look at the drawing board and say, what am I doing wrong? Those aren't age-related losses. If anything, maybe he could train a little bit harder or specifically for his opponents. And maybe we did learn that he might be vulnerable to the big guys who are grappling-based. But at the same time, health-wise, he hasn't shown any sort of, propensity to get caught and knocked out. He doesn't gas really early or anything like that. So I think we're going to see a new and improved Fedor, and I'm actually hoping he'll consider cutting down to 205 after this.
I was just going to ask you, what are your thoughts on Fedor? Win or lose? If he wins this fight, what's next for him? If he loses, I'm still not convinced that Fedor is done, even though if he does lose to Henderson, that'd be 3 in a row. I think what will retire Fedor is his motivation and his passion for the sport rather than, like you said, age-related retirement. But what are your thoughts, win or lose, Fedor after this fight? What's he got to do?
It's hard. It's a tough call. It really depends on the weight class. If he stays at heavyweight, this is really just a meaningless fight. Rankings-wise, it's just a fight for the fans. It's a great fight, but if he stays at heavyweight, this doesn't really do much for him other than just entertainment value. If he decides to cut down to 205, what better way? And I'm not sure how Strikeforce would go about that because this is a non-title fight, especially if he really destroys Henderson. Is there going to really be a need for an immediate rematch, or are they going to kind of force Henderson to vacate the belt? That's kind of an interesting prospect to consider if Fedor does go down to 205 after a victory over the champion in a non-title fight. In Pride, they just kind of immediately would do a rematch. But if he hurts him really bad, I don't know if that's necessary.
Yeah, that'd be pretty wild. Fedor beats Henderson, then drops down to the light heavyweights. Then what? You match him up again at 205, and then do the fight again. We'll see how it goes down. But really, I think the only fight left in the heavyweight division for Fedor that people want to see is a fight against Overeem. Overeem, he's still left in the heavyweight Grand Prix tournament. If he wins it, Fedor's got to obviously beat Henderson, I think, to keep that interest in the heavyweight division. But really, other than an Overeem matchup, I really think if Fedor wants to stay in the sport, be serious about contending for possible title, he's got to drop down to light heavyweight.
I agree. I actually think that one other fight that would be interesting right now would be Josh Barnett. Especially considering the fact that Josh is a big guy, and he's kind of just showed that he's actually, got the kryptonite and the skills in his arsenal to beat Fedor. It's really too bad that he had that positive drug test a few years ago when they were going to be matched up, because Josh could have easily had the glory of being the first man to beat Fedor rather than Verdum. Like you said, Overeem does have some tie-ins going to the tournament right now, so he really isn't, free to do what he wants. Yeah. Barnett as well. I think Fedor's best interest to keep his, career going strong is not to sit on the sidelines and wait for those guys, but is rather to drop down to 205. I feel like that's his future, win or lose.
And, I mean, we're talking a lot about Fedor, but, I mean, if Henderson pulls off this win, I mean, it's another huge fight to put on his resume. And, I mean, really, as champion of the 205 division in Strikeforce, there's not a whole lot of competition. A lot of people want to see the Henderson-Mousasi fight eventually happen, but Mousasi's got to win. And, I mean, Mousasi's coming off of that draw with Jardine. And, I mean, really, Mousasi's got to string some wins together to make this Henderson fight happen. Other than that, I'm not sure who Henderson goes against at 205. Should he beat Fedor? Who's next for Henderson?
I mean, Henderson, one thing that's interesting to consider is that if Henderson beats Fedor, he's not only, top 5 probably right now at light heavyweight. Maybe win-wise, he could use another win at light heavyweight before he's really there. But skill set-wise, he is one of the most interesting matchups for John Jones. I'm going to say that. So they could send him over to the UFC. Maybe, if Fedor beats him badly, they throw Fedor in a vacant fight for the title at 205 and send Hendo over to the UFC. At the same time, I think Henderson's going to be, if he beats Fedor, it's a strong case for him being close to the top of the pound-for-pound rankings, too, right now.
Yeah.
Not at the top, but top 5, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tough to tell exactly what the UFC and Strikeforce are actually planning on doing. I know it seemed like everyone wanted to see the Diaz GSP fight, and somehow they were able to make the Diaz GSP fight happen. I know a lot of people are calling for the Gilbert Melendez versus Frankie Edgar or Gray Maynard winner. So I don't know. I mean, I see if Strikeforce keeps giving up all their champions and giving them to UFC, I think that's a big sign that they're eventually just going to merge both rosters. And, I mean, it's really tough to tell what exactly UFC and Zuffa have in plan for Strikeforce in order to make these sort of dream matchups, like you said, happen. I mean, if Henderson were to beat Fedor, that'd be some huge momentum, and I think it'd be an awesome matchup to see him going against John Jones in the UFC. But really, how realistic is that to happen? We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's tough to tell.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk hypotheticals, all day long with the amount of potential. They could book all the Strikeforce guys against UFC guys and kind of keep the theme for 2011, the remainder, and 2012 being Strikeforce versus UFC, which would be kind of interesting. That would kind of, be an example of MMA taking a page out of pro wrestling's book, but I think it would be for the better in this case, especially if they kept kind of a running tally of a score. That's something I would like to see if they do merge. But for right now, I am interested in seeing, 2 separate promotions. And I think as much as the UFC kind of wants to strip Strikeforce of some of their talent and eventually close the doors on them, they do have a deal with Showtime to fulfill, and I do think they like hitting 2 markets at the same time, pay-per-view and, the premium cable channel.
Showtime, yeah. Well, those are our thoughts. This is the Fight Block. Thanks, Matt, for helping me out for the Strikeforce Henderson versus Fedor predictions. Really looking forward to this card. If all these fights do, in fact, happen, it's just going to be an awesome card once again from Strikeforce. They've been putting on a lot of great fights. And thanks for listening. Follow on Twitter, subscribe, and check out the blog. I'm going to be adding a lot of stuff there, so check it out. Anything left to say?
Yeah, hope to be back soon.
All right. Peace.